Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning to our guests and delegates from across Canada and South Korea. On behalf of Christine Nakamura, Vice President of the Toronto office, I'd like to welcome you to the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada's second pre-mission training session, leading up to the first ever women-only virtual business mission to South Korea. I'd like to echo Christine's congratulations to the dynamic entrepreneurs that were selected to be on the delegation in November. To introduce myself, I'm A.W. Lee, and under Christine's leadership and guidance, I'm the program manager for the Women's Business Mission to Asia. Unfortunately, Christine cannot be here today for family care reasons, so she asked me to step in on her behalf. While we are meeting today in a global digital space with participants across Canada and around the globe, I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge that the place which many Canadians call home are the traditional territories of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. I myself live and work on the territories of the Huron-Wendat, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga people. I'd like to remind everyone of a few housekeeping matters, which are posted to the box on the side of your screen. This webinar is being recorded, and mission delegates are to use the chat dialog located at the bottom of the screen to submit questions for the question and answer session at the end. Delegates will have the opportunity to turn on their videos during the question and answer, and we invite you to do so. Non-delegates and guests should use the question and answer box located at the right-hand corner of your screen. Please contact us offline if we do run out of time and are unable to answer your questions today. Should you wish to access this session in French, please click on the globe button at the bottom of your screen to select it. And for any technical support during the session, you may contact events@asiapacific.ca. And we've scheduled an hour and 15 minutes for today's session. The economic impacts of COVID-19 related public health restrictions have had a profound impact on many small businesses, which are the backbone of the Canadian economy. And it's expected that a disproportionate share of insolvencies will affect women-owned and women-led businesses. As allies of women in business, the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada has the privilege of directly supporting international market expansion of the women-owned and women-led businesses who were selected for the first women-only virtual trade mission to South Korea. By facilitating business deals between our delegates and Korean counterparts, we are supporting the women-led recovery, or she-covery, by tapping into large and high-growth markets in the Asia Pacific. Today's session is the second of 4 leading up to the official mission in November, which will help prepare delegates and invited observers for entry into the South Korean market. Listen to feedback from our delegates know that searching for all the various supports that are available for women entrepreneurs is itself a full-time job. So today we're focused on consolidating some of that information for small businesses looking to scale, diversify their markets, and take advantage of the vibrant South Korean economy. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you our first speaker, Dr. Lois Naherney, who is the President and CEO of DNA Power. She's also a board member on APFC's board of directors. Dr. Naherney has a wealth of experience in business and civic leadership in both Canada and Asia, but for all speakers, we will be foregoing listing their impressive biographies and will refer you to the information in the agenda which we sent to you prior to the session. Lois, I'll now pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, AW, and thank you and welcome to all of the delegates, and congratulations on being selected. I'm so delighted to be joining you today as you prepare for this virtual women's-only business mission to South Korea. And I know you'd prefer to be going in person, but you know we are all making adjustments. So like many of you, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the founder of DNA Power, which is a biotech DNA testing company. And we use DNA information to help people learn their unique genetic makeup and to support day-to-day diet and health decisions. So my company, like yours, I'm sure, has the ability to do business in any country in the world, but we struggle with bandwidth and resources. And so opportunities like this to have support in reaching out other markets is just so valuable. And this is all particularly valuable because we have an opportunity to network with each other, make some new contacts, and we hope grow our businesses. We know women have been disadvantaged both through conscious and unconscious bias over decades. My career was primarily spent in male-dominated fields previously, and I really experienced the unique challenges that women can face. And so as a result, I've spent 20 years advocating for gender equity in areas like the Women's Executive Network on their board for pretty much 20 years. I co-founded We for She to advance gender equity, was an advisor to the BC government on gender equity as the chair of the BC Premier's Women's Council, and we were bringing a gender lens. And I would encourage many of you to look up something called the Prosperity Project, where the intent is to address right now the current backward slide many women are facing as a result of COVID. So I share this to highlight that for years we've been trying to make some progress on gender equity in our economy, and yet with COVID we are seeing report after report on the statistics that it's going to have a very negative impact for women in particular, and in particular for women in business. And we know that women have had a hard time accessing capital and support for large-scale business growth and for other countries. And so it's just phenomenal that this is being supported at this time. So given all of these impacts, supporting women entrepreneurs in business into new markets is more imperative than ever. I'm particularly passionate about working in Asia. I've spent decades traveling and working there. I've completed a degree focused on doing business in Asia, and particularly my twin children are adopted from Vietnam. So we've had a close relationship for some time. And now as a board member on the Asia Pacific Foundation, I see the wealth of opportunities that exist to do business with Asia. This is truly the market where Canadian women in business can make a mark. I'm excited for you for this opportunity. Wish you every success in making new connections. I hope I'll be part of a similar mission in the future. And I know that supporting women like you in business, particularly in emerging and new markets, is one of the best investments that Canada can make. So congratulations to you. This is a great investment for your time and for Canada. It's now my pleasure to welcome and introduce Susan Anzelin, the Director General, Federal Economic Development Agency for the Southern Ontario, who will address you next. So over to you, Susan.
Great, thank you, Lois. And I too want to congratulate all the delegates for being selected for this trade mission. Although virtual, it's still a very exciting opportunity. And, you know, I cannot think of a better opportunity or a better event to really support women and support the Canadian economy by coupling women entrepreneurs with expanding their markets through exports to emerging technology, to emerging countries and exciting countries like South Korea. So again, I'm with FedDev Ontario, and I know many of the delegates are from the Ontario region. So hopefully we can connect afterwards, or you've already connected to folks, to my colleagues at FedDev Ontario. But maybe we can go to the next slide. So you see the little map on the right-hand side. It's a map of Canada. As many of you know, Canada's made up of a number of regions. And so for every region in Canada, there is a regional development agency. So in the West, there's Western Economic Diversification. In the North, there's CanNor. In Ontario, there's two regional development agencies, FedDev Ontario and FedNor. In Quebec, there's the Canada Economic Development Region, Canada Economic Development Agency for Quebec, regions of Quebec, and a Co-Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency. Interesting little tidbit about me is that I've worked with three of them, WD, SEDQ, and FedDev. So I know a little bit about regional development agencies. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about FedDev Ontario, but I want you to know that all the other regional development agencies have similar programs. And so if you're not a resident of Ontario, if you don't have a business in Ontario, do not worry. I want you to reach out to the regional development agency that covers your area. So for FedDev, our mandate is to strengthen Southern Ontario's capacity for innovation, economic development, and growth. And our vision is to have a dynamic, inclusive, and globally competitive Southern Ontario economy. So exporting is critically important. Having companies, especially women companies that export to markets like South Korea and other places, is critically important, not just for your own companies, but for our economy in Southern Ontario and for Canada's economy. And Nadine, to the next slide, please. So our roles as a regional development agency, you'll hear from the other panelists from BDC and Export Development Canada, who will talk about the services they have specifically for exporting. Our services are a bit different. So we see ourselves as a convener, a co-investor, a pathfinder, a champion. Since we were created in 2010 as a result of the global economic recession, we've invested over $2 billion, supported about 20,000 organizations across Southern Ontario, and leveraged $3.2 billion. And we do this working closely with organizations like businesses, small, medium, large businesses, post-secondary institutions, industry associations, municipalities, you name it. It's all of those who are working together to make sure that we have an exciting and prosperous economy. To the next slide, please. So when many people talk about regional development agencies, or they think about regional development agencies, they think about money. But we also provide services. So I'll get to the money part soon, don't worry. But I also wanted to touch upon the services we offer. So we have a team that's dedicated to supporting small businesses. And this provides you with web information and pathfinding services to federal and provincial programs and services. So if you're from Ontario, you'll be familiar with the small business and enterprise centers managed by the province. So we work closely with SPECs. We also provide accelerated growth service. So we try to work with other federal departments so that as a business, you don't have to go to every single one of these organizations. We try to provide you with concierge services. Industrial technological benefits is really Canada's attempt to make sure that when we are seeking large defense contracts, that the regions all have a benefit to these procurement practices. And global skills strategy, of course, as mentioned, and you'll hear from the rest of the panelists, going global is critically important to Canada's economy. To the next slide, please. So our programming, as mentioned, each of the regional development agencies have similar programming, although you will see some nuance differences in terms of how the programs really reflect and tailor the regional interests of the various regions across Canada. In terms of Southern Ontario, we have 3 key programs, or we call them core programs. One is business scale up and productivity. That's really dedicated to for-profit organizations of, small, medium, and large. And those are repayable loans, very low interest loans, no interest loans, but they are repayable. Then there's the regional innovation ecosystems. And this is where we work with a number of different partners within a community or within a number of communities to develop an ecosystem, because we know that it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it takes an ecosystem to raise and support a business. And so this program is really focused to not-for-profit organizations and consortiums. And then the third core program is community economic development and diversification. This is divided into for-profit organizations and not-for-profit organizations. And what's interesting to this in terms of this program is recognizing that a business needs to kind of operate with a community. It's an important part of the community. And so we really try to look at what is the focus of the business and what are the interests of the business, and kind of align that with what is the interest of the community. Also under this program, if you're in a rural area across Canada, there are these organizations called Community Futures Development Corporations. And these are really organizations designed to support startup companies where entrepreneurs have difficulty accessing funding or financing from financial institutions. And so it's kind of really, it gives you an opportunity to get into that continuum within the financial institutions at an early stage. The next slide, please. Given our current circumstances, we know that a number of companies are facing serious challenges as a result of COVID-19. Not just companies, but communities as well. And so the government's response across Canada has been swift and has been really quite impressive. The regional development agencies have also been asked to play a role. And as of Friday, FedDev Ontario is now responsible for providing $436 million in support through the Regional Recovery and Relief Fund. And these are interest-free loans to small and medium-sized companies to address their fixed costs, given that the challenges with COVID-19. If you're applying like CEBA, if you're familiar with CEBA, Emergency Benefits Assistance, the FedDev programming is similar in the sense that if you're looking for $40,000 of assistance and you demonstrate that you're able to pay it off quickly, there is 25% of that will be forgivable, and so that will become $10,000. That will in essence become a grant. Under our Recovery and Relief Fund, I just wanted to highlight for female founders in Southern Ontario that we've also provided a program through two organizations, Northumberland CFDC and the Windsor-Essex Economic Development Corporation, covering the whole area, but it allows up to $5,000 in non-repayable contributions to women-led businesses to help them rebuild, reopen, and revive their businesses. So this is really to cover the costs of purchasing PPEs or sanitizing your facilities. We've also recognized that while you may not need financial support, that if you're an existing client with the agency, that we've looked at trying to find ways to have flexible arrangements. And so if you're a client and you're having challenges, call us, let us know, and we can, we'll work with you to either defer repayment if you have a repayment, extend the reporting requirements, just work with you to make life a little bit easier. Next slide, please. I also wanted to focus on our commitment to gender-based analysis plus, and it's really kind of our commitment to women that I want to focus on. And I should also mention that while I'm the Director General, I'm also the champion for the agency in terms of inclusion and diversity. And so in 2018, the Government of Canada launched a $5 billion women entrepreneurship strategy. And the strategy involves a whole bunch of different programming, and you'll hear from BDC and EDC kind of what they're doing. In terms of FedDev, what we have done is we've provided assistance to the women entrepreneurship strategy ecosystem, either through the regional ecosystem or contributing to the larger national ecosystem. In fact, one of the projects that we're proud to be a part of is this project with the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada to support women entrepreneurs in scaling and expanding into international markets. We also have a number of other projects that are smaller that are focused on Southern Ontario. And while the funding that we did have that was available for female founders and their companies, unfortunately, that programming is all fully subscribed, but there are other organizations that are providing support, like Northumberland Business Development Assistance Corporation, who does have funding available and it would be happy to help. I'm really excited about this program because it's the first time that we had a program dedicated to women in Southern Ontario, and we recognize that the economic prosperity of our region is really, it cannot be done without women. And AW talked about the she-covery. We recognize that prosperity, not just about recovering from pre-COVID, but also really kind of having leading innovation and prosperity depends on organizations like yours, like all of the delegates here, in terms of you having thriving companies. And so we want to grow women-led businesses. We want to increase access to capital. We want to make it easier for you to access capital. We want to make sure that you're able to understand what are the programs out there and how we can help pathfind and do referrals, as well as really better understanding what's happening with women businesses so that we can make sure that our policies and our programs better suit your needs. And then the last slide is there's the contact information. Again, my name is Susan Anslin. I'm at FedDev. Please don't hesitate to contact me. And I think our email addresses were sent, but if not, it's susan.anslin@canada.ca. And again, thank you for the opportunity to present to you. And I really hope you take advantages of the programs that are available through regional development agencies.
Thank you so much, Susan. The supports available from FedDev and other regional support agencies are absolutely vital for supporting small businesses both survive this tough time and scale to the point of looking toward international markets for growth. And speaking to that ecosystem or that village of supports, next, I would like to introduce Annabelle LaRouche, who is Counselor and Trade Commissioner in the Embassy of Canada in South Korea. She joins us from Seoul today. Annabelle, the floor is yours.
Well, bonjour à tous et à toutes. Thank you, APFC, for the invitation. I'm pleased to be with you tonight or this morning in Seoul. I also want to congratulate all the women delegates of this mission. We were looking forward to see you back home in February. Now we are looking to see you virtually in November. Je vais faire ma présentation en anglais, mais je peux également vous répondre en français. Next slide, please. So today I'd like to give you a quick market overview, and then I will briefly cover a CKFTA and innovation collaboration, followed by some information on sector-specific opportunities. Then I'll go over some challenges in the markets, and we'll finish my presentation with an overview of the Trade Commissioner's Service. Next, please. So first, let me give you some context. South Korea is about the same size as the island of Newfoundland. So you can get from the capital, Seoul, to Busan, the second largest city at the other end of the country, in 2.5-hour fast train ride. The population of Korea is larger than Canada's, and the capital city and its metropolitan area are one of the biggest cities in the world. And about half the country's people live in the Seoul metropolitan area. So Koreans know quite a lot about Canada, and they like our country for a number of reasons, including people-to-people connection. So as you can see on the slide, there's a lot of Canadians living in South Korea, lots of Canadians from Korean origins, and also lots of Koreans studying in Canada. Next, please. So for Canadian businesses, Korea is an attractive market. It's one of the largest in the world. So it's the world's 12th largest economy and the Asian fourth largest economy. And it's also the world's 7th largest importer. But Korea also has a diverse range of countries import from, as you can see from this slide. So Canada has only about 1.1% share of Korean imports of goods. So there is room for growth. Next, please. If we look at global trade by both countries, Canadian trade, of course, is dominated by the US. But as you can see, in 2019, South Korea was Canada's 7th largest export destination and 6th largest source of import. So this is a very important market for Canada. Next, please. Let's have a quick look now at the type of goods that Korea imports from Canada. As you can see, mined natural resource accounts for half of Canada's exports. So I'd like to say that Korea's supply chain starts in Canada. So we provide some of the metal, energy, and inputs that Korea's manufacturing industry needs to remain competitive. In this way, Canada and Korea have a very complementary trade relationship. Next, please. So now let's talk about the Canada-Korea Free Trade Agreement. The trade relationship between Canada and Korea has not developed overnight, but it has become stronger in the last 5 years thanks to the CKFTA. Until the CPTPP, the Comprehensive and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership came into force at the end of 2018, the CKFTA was Canada's only free trade agreement with the Asia-Pacific region. And before CKFTA came into force, the average Korean import duty was 13%, which was high. From the moment CKFTA came into force, Korean import duties on most products were eliminated or a gradual phase-out process began. So at the moment, over 95% of exports, Canada's export to Korea, enter duty-free, and new reduction occur annually on January 1st. So upon full implementation of the CKFTA in 2032, Korean duties will be eliminated on 99.75% of Canada's current exports, which is significant. Next, please. So let's have a look now at the SCI relationship. Canada and Korea signed an SCI agreement in 2016, which came into force since 2017. One interesting program for Canadian companies is the Canadian International Innovation Program, or CIIP. This program is offered by Global Affairs Canada, and we offer it in collaboration with NRC IRAP. Canada only has this type of program with 5 countries. An annual call for proposal is published by both countries every year, usually in January or February. Both countries contribute $1 million and select a certain number of projects. So one thing to keep in mind is that Canadian applicants need a Korean partner to apply. So this is why the Canadian Embassy in Seoul has been leading Canadian innovation mission to Korea in various sectors since 2017. And in order to introduce Korean partners to Canadian partners and foster future R&D partnerships. Next slide, please. Now I would like to cover some of the opportunities in the sectors that are of interest for the member of the delegation. So let's start with agri-food. Being a small mountainous country with a large population, Korea imports at least 60% of its food. And Canada is Korea's 10th largest source of agri-food imports. In 2019, agri-food and seafood imports from Canada were valued at over 980 million. Thanks to CKFTA, Canadian exports of many products have been growing in the last few years. In terms of trends, I would say rising prosperity drives increased demand in quality and healthy ingredients. Koreans are also very trend conscious. One day they want aronia and the next day they focus on another trendy superfood. So fast food and ready meals are growing more popular also due to many factors, such as women entering into the workforce, growing number of single person households, generally fast-paced lifestyles, and also small kitchens in the homes in Korea. If we look at the impact of COVID-19 on Canadian exports, it's been limited because increased demand for bulk delivered foods, ready meal, frozen foods, kind of compensated for the decrease in demand from hotel and restaurants. In terms of opportunities, there's many, including seafood, meat, grains, functional foods, superfoods, but also the pet food market has been growing a lot in the last couple of years due to Koreans buying more pets. As in many sectors, the key to success in the Korean food market is to identify a good partner, to provide reliable and cost-effective supply, and also not to neglect the client relationship. Next slide, please. Next sector I would like to cover is life science. So South Korea has a very well-developed healthcare system and provides high-quality healthcare with its national health insurance system. But South Korea also has the world's most rapidly aging population, which has been a major social issue as it led to increase in medical costs and also chronic disease. For that reason, Korea is increasingly willing to tackle these problems, to embrace new technology to tackle these issues. So in terms of medical device, the Korean medical device market is the Asia's largest after China and after Japan. About 60% of medical devices are imported, mainly from the US, Germany, and Japan. And there's also a strong demand for products related to elder care and chronic disease. And the government is trying to ease the regulatory process to facilitate market access. There's a lot of interest for digital health products and services as well. AI-based monitoring diagnostic, VR, AR-based simulated rehabilitation products and services. So there's a lot of room for companies, and especially in the theme of the mission that is elder care, the care economy. So in terms of pharmaceutical, Korean biopharmaceutical have led recent growth based on Korea's world-class infrastructure and also experience with advanced clinical studies. Korean companies like Celltrion, Samsung Biologic have become global leaders in the production of biosimilars, and other Korean big pharma such as Green Cross, Yuan, and Hanmi have developed strong pipelines for various therapeutic targets with a main focus on oncology. The increase in demand for quality healthcare has led to higher domestic production of vaccine and drugs, especially in cell therapies, personalized drugs, as well as application of AI technology to new drug discovery and clinical development. I'd like to add that there's a keen interest from Korean SMEs in joint R&D with foreign partners, and those joint R&D collaboration can be a great way for you to develop long-lasting business relationship and to ensure that your products is suitable for the Korean markets. Next, please. So the last sector I'd like to cover briefly is the ICT sector. Of course, the name of some Korean leading ICT multinational like Samsung and LG are well known around the world, but other names such as SK Hynix or KT are large and leading developers of ICT and software. In addition to these big companies, there's a big ecosystem of SMEs and startups with venture capital and various incubators to support them. To remain competitive compared to low-cost competitors such as China, Korean companies have been spending vast amount of R&D to develop new and more advanced products and technologies. Korea was the first country to launch 5G mobile services in April 2019, and this new 5G capabilities and infrastructure is accelerating the adoption of so-called Internet of Things, or IoT, and smart device. As it's the case for life science, we've noted that there's quite a lot of interest from Korean SMEs to partner with Canadian counterpart for joint R&D. Finally, one recent development, and also in response to COVID-19, is that Korea unveiled the blueprint of the Korean New Deal. It includes the Green New Deal, which focuses on clean techs, and the Digital New Deal, which focuses on the ICT infrastructure. It's a bit too early to identify specific mechanism that would support the participation of foreign companies to all the initiative in the New Deal, but with this high level of investment, it will certainly create business opportunities for Canadian companies with innovative technologies and the right Korean partner. Next slide, please. So now that I've covered some of the opportunities, I'd like to briefly go over the challenges. First, the Korean culture is a male-dominated business culture with big gender gap. South Korea ranks as 108 out of 153 countries in terms of gender gap. Things are changing, but there's still a lot of work ahead to have more gender balance in the society at large, but also the business culture. When it comes to public procurement, public institutions do have some law that they have to award some percentage of their contracts to women-owned companies, but foreign-owned companies would have to partner with the Korean-owned companies to access them. When it comes to private procurement, unfortunately, these processes do not really include mechanisms to support foreign or Korean women-owned company. When it comes to making sourcing decisions, Korean companies tend to base their decision on criteria like quality, delivery time, price, and innovation. Of course, there are several support and training programs for women-owned companies in Korea, but they're largely focused on women-owned Korean women-owned companies. When it comes to more general challenges, I'd like to note that Korea is a very competitive market, also price sensitive, and company will need to invest time and resources to build a long-lasting relationships with the partners. Language barrier can also be an issue, even if the younger generations tends to be a bit more fluent in English. But that said, with the right technology, the right business partner, you will be able to overcome those challenges. Next, please. So last but not least, let me briefly cover the Trade Commissioner Service, which reports to Global Affairs Canada. So we have offices in 160 cities over the world, and we provide free services to Canadian companies to help them navigate international markets. Our mandate includes 3 broad objectives. So first, we provide customized business development services to Canadian exporters to help them enter Korea. We also help Korean companies who want to invest in Canada, and we try to identify and facilitate innovation and R&D partnerships between Canadian and Korean companies. In Seoul, our team includes 19 trade commissioner and project assistants, and we cover a broad range of sectors. Next slide, please. So now let me go over briefly the core services we offer. When it comes to preparation for international markets, it means that we can provide advice and information to clients who are trying to enter the international markets. So in other words, first time and are relatively new exporters with little experience. Usually this service are provided by our network of offices across Canada. The second one, market potential assessment, it's really to help companies like yours determine the level of opportunity that there is in the markets and the amount of resource and time you will need to mobilize to be successful in that market. The third service, identification of qualified contacts. In a nutshell, it's business matchmaking. So we do that during trade mission, of course, but we also offer that individually to our clients. The fourth service, commercial solving problem. It means that although we cannot enter into private dispute or act on your behalf in a legal dispute, we can advise on market access problem and other business challenges like custom clearance, shipping, unfair business treatment, contract bidding, and so on and so forth. I will stop there in terms of description of services, but I really encourage you to visit a website to learn more about our services and also funding programs. I'd like to point out CanExport. CanExport was designed to support business travel, but due to the travel restriction because of COVID-19, it has been modified to include several categories of non-travel activities to help you prepare for international markets. And it includes virtual participation in international trade events and meetings and other things like that. We also organize women-focused trade mission on a regular basis in different countries around the world. And we have also information on tools and programs for women-owned companies on the TCS website under Business Women in International Trade. So please do visit our websites to learn more about what we have to offer. Next slide, please. So it's the end of my presentation. I thank you very much. Merci beaucoup pour votre participation. We look forward to working with you during the mission to Korea. And our team of trade commissioner is ready to help. And you have our contact. My contact information is there, but also I can connect you to the right trade commissioner that is specialized in your own, depending on the sector you cover. We can connect you to the right people. So merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Annabelle. That was just scratching the surface of the in-depth sector-specific information that the Trade Commissioner Service has for you, our delegates, and is an invaluable source of support for all Canadian companies looking to expand internationally in Korea and in other markets globally. Next, I'd like to welcome Jennifer Cook, the Corporate Lead for Women in International Trade at Export Development Canada, to continue discussing the rich ecosystem of supports for women in international trade. Jennifer?
Great, thank you so much, and hello everyone. I'm really excited to be part of today's session, and again, my congratulations to all the delegates for taking this step to explore global markets for your business. As AW mentioned, I'm Jennifer Cook, and I lead EDC's Women in Trade strategy. Next slide, please. I'm going to try and cover a lot of ground today, as my previous co-presenters have done as well. I want to start by level setting a little bit to tell you about EDC and how we help Canadian businesses, as well as our commitments to Canadian women-owned and led businesses. I'm also going to outline some of the financial tools and knowledge solutions that EDC can provide to help you along your entire export journey. Next slide, please. So for those of you who might not be as familiar with EDC, our job is essentially to help Canadian companies do business successfully in international markets. Next slide, please. We're Canada's export credit agency, so we're owned 100% by the federal government, and as such, we're Canada's international risk experts. So we use our deep knowledge of international trade and global buyers to enable us to take on and manage significant levels of risk in order to help you grow your business internationally. Next, please. So EDC is part of the federal family of organizations that all work together to support Canadian companies as they venture abroad to grow and access new markets. And we very much work closely together as Team Canada. So in addition to the federal organizations listed here, like you've heard from the TCFs and you're about to hear from BDC, we also work with the whole ecosystem of organizations, including regional development agencies and civil society across the country. Next, please. So I want to mention that there's many misconceptions about exporting and about EDC. The main one is essentially that it's only for large companies or for those that are making and shipping products overseas. But in fact, we help companies of all sizes and in all sectors, including those whose businesses is in delivering services. In fact, in Canada, services has outpaced goods when it comes to exports. Of course, COVID-19 has caused massive disruption for Canadian companies and for our economy. EDC is here to support Canadian companies, both in good times and in bad times. And so we're playing a role in responding to our current economic crisis together with our other federal partners. In response to COVID-19, the Government of Canada this year temporarily expanded EDC's mandate, allowing us some domestic powers to support all Canadian businesses during this challenging time, whether they export and sell internationally or only within Canada. And this is in place until the end of 2021. Next, please. Now more than ever, EDC is committed to engaging and supporting underrepresented entrepreneurs and trade, including and especially women-owned and women-led businesses. And we're doing this with clear intention. We know that the number of women entrepreneurs is growing and can have an enormous benefit to our economy and our community, and our goal is to support them to grow and scale globally. Next, please. We're doing this by investing resources, including onboarding myself as a dedicated corporate lead to be accountable for increasing our support to women entrepreneurs such as you all. As champions within Canada's women's entrepreneurship strategy, we're reaching out to women entrepreneurs more proactively and have a strategic plan to focus, invest, and measure our progress in supporting more women-owned and women-led businesses. Next slide, please. So you may or may not have heard some of these facts and figures. Our economy truly is stronger when there's more women entrepreneurs. We know there's great potential for more women entrepreneurs to export. Today, approximately 11% of Canadian majority women-owned businesses are exporting. So that's a little over 12,000 companies in Canada. And they're actually 4 times more likely to be larger than non-exporters. Moreover, exporters are also 25% more innovative and competitive when playing on a global playing field. And their business is less risky because they're more diversified. They have a broader set of customers and are better equipped to handle the ebbs and flows of economic upturns and downturns. This, in the end, all leads to more resilient companies who stay in business longer. And we know that if we can increase the number of women-owned businesses who export in Canada, even by just a small amount, we can add significantly to the value of Canada's GDP, which would be good for everyone. As of August 31st, 2020, EDC has facilitated $1.6 billion worth of trade for women-owned and women-led businesses since 2018. Next, please. Our approach is grounded in 5 main pillars. We want to start by inspiring and building awareness among women entrepreneurs about taking their business global and about how EDC can help. Secondly, we want to educate by providing the knowledge and skills so that women can export with confidence, providing connections both to the ecosystem of organizations that can help as well as to opportunities internationally to enable with the financial tools and to empower with our corporate support for gender equity and women's economic empowerment broadly. At the end of the day, success will be when there's more women-owned and women-led businesses providing their goods and services to the world. Next, please. We've set some very strong targets and launched initiatives that are really aimed at creating more opportunities for women in trade so that they can access markets as well as access the capital which you need to grow beyond borders. We're very proud of these initiatives, and I'm going to speak about a few of them in more detail. Next, please. As I mentioned, at EDC, our job is to help Canadian companies do business in international markets, and we do this in 3 main ways. The first is by providing free market intelligence so that you can make the most informed business decisions. And I'll talk about this in a little more detail later on. Secondly, through our global presence with over 20 international offices in key markets, often co-located with our colleagues in the Trade Commissioner's Service around the world, EDC can offer trade insights as well as link Canadian companies to international opportunities. And finally, we offer products and services that help you manage risk and access the working capital that you need to fuel your success abroad. Next, please. So I'm going to spend some time now to speak about some of the specific solutions and resources that you can access at EDC. Next, please. One of the most key tools that you should be aware of and leverage when you sell outside of Canada is credit insurance. This is a solution that can help protect your profits and your balance sheet by insuring against the risk of non-payment by your customers abroad. It can reduce your risk by covering your receivables at up to 90%. It allows you to also be more competitive by being able to offer better payment terms to your customers, more competitive payment terms. A lot of companies will start exporting by only accepting cash up front, but more and more customers are looking for more competitive payment terms. So with credit insurance, you can do so confidently. Thirdly, you can also increase your access to working capital because banks and financial institutions are more willing to assign a higher lending value to foreign receivables, which are insured. I want to point out that with EDC, there are many flexible options that you can select to get the coverage that's right for your needs. You can cover one particular contract, one or a few customers, or your entire portfolio of accounts receivable, depending on what makes most sense for your business. Next slide, please. When it comes to access to capital for business growth, EDC has several valuable solutions which might be right for your company. The first thing I'm going to talk about is our Women in Trade Investment Program, which was launched as part of our Women in Trade strategy back in May of 2019, with a $50 million fund to help close the gap in access to capital for women entrepreneurs. We subsequently increased this fund to $100 million earlier this year. And through this program, funds come in the form of equity capital, and EDC will invest directly in Canadian companies owned and or strategically led at the C-suite level by one or more women. We also invest through this fund in Canadian venture capital funds that they themselves demonstrate commitment to gender diversity, both in their portfolios as well as at their investment decision-making table. We really feel strongly that we want to support more female investors in our venture capital industry. Through this fund, EDC co-invests in women-led companies at their seed or Series A stage, typically with a minimum of about $1 million per year revenue run rate. And really, it's meant for those companies that are commercialized with some solid revenue traction and companies that are accelerating with significant export growth potential. Next slide, please. Outside of this, EDC has several tools where we partner with your financial institution, so that you can access the working capital loans that you need to grow. Today, I'm going to focus on two main programs, but I encourage you to review our website so that you can see all the financial tools that could potentially support your business. Our Export Guarantee Program is widely used by Canadian banks and credit unions to support companies who need to fund growth. It's a risk-sharing solution where EDC shares the risk with your financial institution on a loan facility that they provide. It's extremely flexible and can be applied to many different types of loan facilities. Next slide, please. As we saw a spike in needs for liquidity for Canadian companies at the onset of COVID, a number of new COVID-19 related financing relief programs are now also available, some of which are through EDC, such as the Business Credit Availability Program Loan Guarantee. It's very similar to our Export Guarantee Program, but much more streamlined to make it quicker to get cash in the hands of businesses who need it. Again, it relies on your financial institution's processes, so companies can access this loan guarantee program while only dealing with their bank or credit union. I want to mention briefly as well that in addition to the BCAP loan guarantee that was launched, EDC also launched a BCAP investment matching program for Canadian exporters that are looking to complete a raise during this difficult time of the pandemic. EDC will match up to a maximum of $5 million of equity capital invested by a private sector institutional VC or venture capital firm, a private equity firm, or other corporate partners, so that Canadian companies can get that much help, that much needed capital during this time. Next slide, please. Okay, so finally, I'm going to wrap up here. I just want to highlight some of the valuable knowledge resources that you can also access through EDC, all free of charge. Next slide, please. So when it comes to exporting, there are a few keys to success. Knowledge, preparation, and planning are really, really important. And so EDC has curated some very specialized tools to help with this as part of our trade toolkit. I'm going to highlight a couple of them. The Export Help Hub is a curated digital knowledge hub where companies can access insights and know-how on expanding internationally. Currently, this hub includes information about US and European Union markets, and it can help you access expert insights that your peers are using to grow their US and EU sales. So it gives you trustworthy answers to your market questions all in one place. If you don't find your answers in this hub, you can also reach out directly to an Export Help trade advisor that can do research for any trade-related question and get you those answers back in an efficient way. EDC Enlist draws on EDC's extensive global network to bring you trusted service providers in Canada and markets around the world. So it helps you connect to the right contacts and put your export plans in motion. EDC Company Insights is an interactive tool that allows you to find reliable and trustworthy information on companies that you might potentially want to do business with anywhere in the world. It guides exporters step by step to help you conduct part of the due diligence process that's needed before you partner with another global organization. The Fit Light Learning series is bite-sized modules that you can read about various exporting topics in less than an hour each. It's meant to help you learn about topics such as market entry strategies, sales channel development, cash flow management, international contracts, or even foreign exchange risk. And finally, EDC's Trade Insights website can provide a wealth of information. You can download EDC Market Next Team, as well as ebooks on export topics or on doing business in specific markets. The content in these guides can save you so much time when you're researching a market and provide the expertise you need. So I've covered a lot. I think I'm going to stop there and happy to answer questions at the end. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I know that many of our delegates and observers are interested in the financial and knowledge solutions that EDC offers, and I encourage them all to connect with any of our speakers today. Lastly, please give a warm welcome to Michelle Scarborough, the Managing Partner of Strategic Investments and Women in Technology Fund with the Business Development Bank of Canada, or BDC. Michelle?
Thanks, AW. Hi, everybody. And congratulations again. I think we've all said it 50 times, but I'll say it once more. Congratulations again to all of the delegates. I think this is just a terrific opportunity for everyone, and I'm really happy to be here again. So AW and the team, thank you for the invitation. I'll get Nadine, I think, to move to the next slide. And I'll talk a little bit about BDC, or the Business Development Bank of Canada. Most of you are probably aware of our organization. I'm going to run through some of the highlights and then spend a little bit of time talking about the Women in Technology Venture Fund, which is a key highlight and something that I run as a part of the BDC Capital arm of BDC. So first of all, maybe I'll start with the fact that BDC is the bank devoted exclusively to entrepreneurs. I joined the bank 3 years ago from another venture capital firm, and prior to that, as an entrepreneur, did a lot of business with BDC over the years. So I've been able to enjoy having a relationship with the bank from many different angles now, in addition to my role within. The bank does three things, really. We operate as a financial institution focused on commercial applications. So we don't do any retail banking. This is a fully commercial bank and focused on three areas: financing, which includes loans, small, medium, and large loans; advisory services, providing expert advice to companies as they grow; and then capital, which is the investment arm of the bank, which is the arm that I participate in. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in detail as we move through this. So if we can go to the next slide, please. Thanks. Just to give you a sense of the reach of the bank, we service about 62,000 entrepreneurs. We work with them through various iterations of their business, again, from the very beginning stages of their business all the way through until they're working in collaboration with us and our colleagues at EDC as they look to export. Hopefully we see those numbers continue to do that. We have about 2,400 employees, including about 100 active champions for women entrepreneurship across Canada. I'll speak to them in a few minutes. But our clients are as broad as our employee base, and we really are where all of our entrepreneurs need us to be. And despite COVID times, working with our entrepreneurs through both virtual and now in some cases back on the ground. I'll get you to move to the next slide, please. Thank you. So as I mentioned, the bank has a very large investment arm called BDC Capital, and BDC Capital has approximately $2 billion under management. The bank itself is about $35 billion under management. So BDC Capital is a large enterprise within BDC, and our job really is as an active investor across the Canadian landscape, supporting the venture capital ecosystem, and we do that from seed right through to scale with a variety of products and, let's say, applications that we employ into the market based on market need and where there might be a potential gap in the market or where there's an opportunity for us to play a role in shaping some of the landscape. We were very active in venture capital, both as direct investors, as fund-of-funds investors, investing in venture capital funds in Canada, in addition to a very active ecosystem development mandate to build a sustainable ecosystem for venture capital and for the startup community, building technology enterprises that can go global. We also just launched an IP financing group, and that group is now out in the market looking at opportunities to provide financing to companies that have intellectual property. Most of those companies that they look at are in the healthcare space. So for those delegates that have healthcare at their core and have potential patents or intellectual property, this is the group that should be on your radar as you continue to look at your growth strategy. We have a clean tech practice which focuses really on clean tech opportunities that have large scale projects or plants that they need to create. So if you think of some of the very large brand new clean tech projects that are around GHG reduction, emissions, and so on, a lot of the clean tech practice focuses on those kinds of businesses from a financing perspective. And then again, along the value chain, as we move up the growth curve of a company, we have a growth equity team that focuses on growth equity and some private equity financing and taking small minority owned positions in those companies, again, to provide them with the equity capital in order to grow their businesses globally. From the BDC Capital perspective, I will say that we do look for companies that are global out of the gate, that are looking to build a big company that is going to compete on the world stage, and that we're creating Canadian champions all the way. So I'll get you to move to the next slide, please. Thank you. Just to give you a sense again of where we sit with respect to venture capital, we've got, like I said, $2 billion under management right now, and about 800, we're getting closer to about 900 investee companies, either directly through our teams or through our funds. Before we move on to the next slide and start talking a little bit more about what we do for women entrepreneurs specifically, I will say that we do have a number of direct investing funds within BDC VC. Those funds are split, and I'm going to talk about the Women in Technology Venture Fund as we sort of move through the presentation, but I did want to highlight the fact that we do have an industrial and clean tech fund, and we've got an industrial innovation fund that have just been stood up. The Industrial Innovation Fund is a $250 million fund, and that fund does focus on energy technology, ag tech, and things that would shape the digital transformation of heavy industry, including manufacturing. So something, again, to be thinking about if you're in one of those businesses, or thinking about how your technology company could have an adjacent application in one of those additional industries. So we'll move on to the next slide. I want to spend a little bit of time really talking about our women entrepreneur strategy and some of the things that we're doing to support women entrepreneurs in Canada. Keep in mind that BDC focuses on investing in Canadian companies, but a number of years ago, we stood up the Women Entrepreneurship Program which is a bank-wide initiative really to address the needs of women entrepreneurs. This was a mandate that really came as a result of discussions at the board level with senior management and in consultation with the market and the shareholder, which is the Government of Canada. And so this initiative started out with a lofty goal to deploy 1.4 billion in loans into women, majority women-led companies, and also to establish the Women in Technology Venture Fund, which again, I'll talk about in a second. So if we move to the next slide, please. And you can just hit all the buttons. There you go. Hit all the buttons. So really we provide 4 key pillars, very similar to Jennifer and EDC, with respect to providing capital support to women, again, majority, if we're thinking about financing, majority owned women-led businesses, developing tools and ecosystem initiatives and connecting networks and inspiring through storytelling and through mentorship, a way in which to bring all of these elements together for the purposes, again, of building and providing the resources to women so that they can grow either within the Canadian infrastructure and be great contributors to the Canadian marketplace, or to grow globally and to really blow the doors off in terms of what they're able to achieve on a global basis. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about my passion, which is the Women in Technology Venture Fund. This is a fund that when I started 3 years ago was a $50 and then a $70 million fund. And in consultation with the marketplace, we determined that we really needed around 200 million to do what we needed to do right. And so this fund has 3 pillars. The first pillar is to invest directly into women-led technology companies, and I'm going to give you the difference in definition in a moment. To indirectly invest in funds where there is at least one woman in the general partnership, so one woman in the GP or the management team of that fund. And the third pillar is to develop a sustainable ecosystem by which we can grow the number of women leaders in technology and the number of women investors that are investing in tech or otherwise. And so we've taken a long-term view and a long-term approach to how we've structured this fund and the ways in which we're going about deploying the capital. So we're now 3 years into the investment period of the fund, and I'll give you a few of the highlights along the way. But first, let's talk a little bit about our mission statement and what we do. So the next slide, please. So our philosophy really is to build Canadian champions that are women-led. And we're looking to invest in companies that are global from the get-go, that have a big ambition, that are disrupting industries or maybe multiple industries, building platforms and taking maybe a different way of attacking a market and really going after that marketplace. We've got, we see, I'm going to say thousands of companies every year. And we are seeing, now that we've been in business for 3 years, we are starting to see a shift change in the number of women that are starting technology companies with an intention to grow a global business in Canada. So that has been a very big sea change for me to see, and something that I'm very happy about and want to see more of as we kind of move. And I know that our delegates are representative of some of those kinds of companies. We always invest with other investors. We never invest by ourselves. And we always invest with investors that can bring additional value to us. In addition to our capital, we like to bring our networks to bear. We like to help make new market connections. We work very closely with the Trade Commission Service, with EDC, and with many other partners, both at the regional level, at the national level, and globally, in order to make sure that our companies have the best chance of success that they can have. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. So as I said, our investment approach is to invest in companies from seed to scale, which means that we invest at the seed stage, at Series A, and at Series B. We typically will lead an investment round, which means that we will write the term sheet, we will price the company, and we will look for syndicate partners in order to make sure that they have the right company, company at the boardroom table and at the investment table, to make sure that the company and the management team have the right tools by which to grow and the right networks at their disposal. We're very active with our companies in terms of driving growth, and we're always looking for opportunities through trade missions like this with the Asia Pacific Foundation and many others in order to support companies as they grow and to make sure that the women in the leadership teams of these companies also have a very active role. By definition, as I said I was going to get to this, by definition, women-led companies, women-led technology companies for us means that we invest in companies where there is a woman as a co-founder or a founder, a CEO, or in a meaningful position in the C-suite of the company, having been in that position for a minimum of 12 months. And we do that because we don't want to penalize a woman who happens to be a fabulous CTO who doesn't want to be the CTO or the CEO of that company. But we want to provide the opportunity for them to excel in their role, in their company, and to, again, be a champion in their own realm to drive business growth. And we've got lots of examples of that in our portfolio, including Alana from Hi Mama, who is the CTO, and some CEOs who are newly appointed as a result of the fact that they were in meaningful positions in corporate development or in business development and sales, driving growth of those companies globally. Amagia just appointed Geraldine Oshab as the CEO of Amagia. She was their head of corporate development and their head of business strategy and business development. So just some examples of the kinds of reasons why we want to make sure that we invest in women-led companies and continue to support the entire management team from a diversity perspective and to grow those women over in their roles over time so that they can be successful. And then again, the third is to build a strong and enabling network, which allows us to see all of the boats rise. So see more women leaders in technology and see more investors who are women jump off of the sidelines and start to invest in companies like the ones in our portfolio and many others that are coming into the market now. So I'll move to the next slide. Thanks. So our impact to date might be a little bit deceiving. We've invested in 32 companies, 5 emerging funds with women in the leadership team, and we've touched about 2,000 women entrepreneurs to date. But I want to focus on something with respect to the portfolio companies for just a moment, just to give you a little bit of perspective. The 32 companies in our portfolio right now are generating about close to 400 million in revenues. They employ about 1,400 people across Canada. All of these are Canadian, again, Canadian companies. Their management teams are composed of greater than 50% women in the management teams. And they take diversity extremely seriously. And all of them, with the Women in Technology Fund, participated in a diversity and inclusion study last year, the results of which we're going to be writing a white paper on shortly. And this was the first study of its kind for a fund like ours. And we are the only women in technology venture fund in the world right now that is doing any of this kind of work. But they take this very seriously, and it's really interesting to see the impact of that. The amount of additional equity that has been raised by these women-led businesses is approximately $280 million to date. And that is just through a number of rounds of financing. Many of these companies are seed and Series A stage, and in some cases moving on to Series B. So I just want to give you a bit of a flavor of the kinds of companies and the kinds of leadership that these women and 90% of these companies, 98% of these companies have a woman as the CEO in the business. So it gives you some examples of some role models that are really making this work. All of them are doing business both inside of Canada and outside of Canada. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. Again, just an example of some of the ecosystem partners. I'm not going to spend a bunch of time on this, but this gives you a bit of a landscape. What is not shown here are the numerous corporations that we work with in order to help drive business. We work very, very closely with organizations like Salesforce and others when we're talking to our companies and when we're trying to help facilitate introductions to potential customers. And we spend a lot of time doing that in order to make sure that that they're seeing their growth. And this is, exactly what these kinds of missions are all about, helping you to connect with the right customer base and additional investors as you move to exercise your ability to grow a global business. And I'll just move to the last slide. I didn't want to spend a ton of time on all of our COVID programs. There's tons of resources about that on bdc.ca. And there's so many programs that we've run as a result of the crisis and coming out of into recovery, that we could spend another hour just talking about that. So I'll leave you with some resources that you can find on bdc.ca. And the last slide has my contact information on it. And I'm happy to make introductions for you into the bank at a variety of different levels if that's of interest to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and to all of our presenters today. I see we have a compliment in the Q&A to all of the outstanding women presenters today. And I do know that we have a few questions lined up, and I'm cognizant of time, so we will expand the time just 10 minutes to allow time for some discussion and to answer some questions. I'd like to invite all of our delegates to please turn on your videos and join our expert panel for the question and answer period. And please keep your mic off until until you'd like to ask your question. And to get things going, I see that one of our delegates, Patrice, has a question for Michelle on the supports that you mentioned. Patrice?
Hi, Michelle. Sorry, I'm not having my video on because I'm sick as a dog, so I'm just going to save everybody from that. But I know that you had said that there were still a number of women that were in fact leading these companies. You said they were 90% of them were the CEOs. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, there's one company out of the 32 that does not have a woman in the as the CEO. Everyone else is the CEO.
Have you gotten any pushback around that definition of a woman-led company? Because again, it really worries me, because I feel like I'm a First Nations person, and there's been a certain amount of tokenism as well in there, putting one First Nations person on a board, putting one First Nations person in the C-suite in order to engage with these programs. And I feel like that doesn't really help women in business.
Yeah, I hear you. We have a mandate that it has to, at least one woman has to be in the position, whatever the position is, for a period of a minimum of 12 months. And at every turn, so let's say we put money in at the seed stage, and then the company comes back and they're going to do a Series A, we revisit that definition every single time. So there's no.
I'm sorry to interrupt, because we did know there really is, because I know that for example, I would hazard the guess that all the women-owned businesses on this call, we have a lot more than one woman on our C-suite. The trend is for women hire other women. Men hire a woman to sit for the fact that she has a uterus. So I think that perhaps it's. I don't know if it goes far enough, to be honest.
Yeah, well, like I said, we've been pushing it pretty hard, and we've got quite an eye on that. It's a very big issue for us, and so it's something that we spend all of our time thinking about and making sure that we do right. So, but I appreciate your feedback. You're going to be appreciate your feedback.
So you are going to be looking at that definition again in the future?
Well, we look at it all the time, but from a leadership perspective, we do make sure that there are more than, at least one woman, as I've said, in the C-suite of all of those companies. And in all of the cases where we've got an investment right now, the outside of one, the women are all CEOs. And I couldn't give you the stats on how many of them are founders or co-founders, but it's probably more than 50% at this point, which is the other reason why we've done the diversity study, and we'll continue to do the diversity study also. It's a way in which we can also measure.
I think would be an interesting measurement is to see on how many women in this call have women in their C-suite, and if they're the only one on their in that organization.
Yeah, I would bet there's more. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely great suggestions, Patrice. Yeah. And there are so many gaps to fill, and we're so grateful to all of the support agencies to try and identify and fill those gaps, to close the gap in gender inequality. And so the next question from the audience is a broader question on, because all of your agencies support women-owned businesses at different stages of growth and on their export journey, what would you recommend as best practices for exporters trying to forge business ties during specifically the pandemic? And this can go to any one of the presenters. Particularly any that have COVID-specific programs, like Michelle or Susan.
So just to clarify, AW, is the question about like making connections to opportunities internationally for growth, or?
Yes, so it was actually related to a more specific question in terms of the disruptions to supply chains and business partnerships during COVID. A more specific question that was related to the broader question was, what should an entrepreneur do if a business partner in Korea, for example, faces a major disruption in their operations or ability to do business, such as significant restrictions due to the pandemic second wave or sanctions from another country? Are there programs and supports available to support small businesses in those situations?
So
Oh.
Go ahead, Susan, you're up.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. So, you know, in terms of FedDev or the other regional development agencies, what we look at in terms of the COVID-19 response is really your fixed costs. And so, you know, where you've encountered expenditures and just don't have the revenues to come in, you know, that's where we step in. But, you know, in terms of, I was kind of interested in the first part of the question, which was, what are some of the best practices? And, you know, in my previous role, I was the executive director of the Institute for Border Logistics and Security. Our focus was getting companies border ready. Now, it was really to export between Canada and the United States because I was in the Windsor area. And I really would emphasize to all the women, you know, on this call is to really think about exporting and start small. Like, you don't have to be big, right? As a lot of the panelists said, start to develop and focus in where you have strengths and where you have strong relationships. Because I think those strong relationships will really help you to then build your export market.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was going to go. Is that it's important to have those relationships in advance. But I think the other thing, and you know, Jennifer might have something to say about this too, but the other thing to think about, it's not a program specific thing, but it's more of a business planning, more about business planning, is making sure that when you're establishing contracts, or let's say you've got an existing supply chain agreement over there in, you know, maybe it's Korea, maybe it's in China, maybe it's in another kind of US, doesn't matter, but just make sure that those contracts have certain clauses in them that protect you. And, you know, I think Jennifer's, you know, EDC provides credit insurance and some of those kinds of things, but you really want to make sure that the contracts are well defined and that they're reviewed by lawyers in the country in which you're going to do business, so that you understand and you have legal representation providing you with advice that pertains to the laws of the land there, so you don't get into a sticky situation unknowingly, just because you're just not aware of what's happening in that market.
Yeah, I would agree completely with what both Susan and Michelle have said. Also, you know, there's a lot of talk about diversification, right? Like, similar to our investment strategies, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And I think a lot of companies have learned that through our current situation. But being able to grow your networks and, you know, have multiple contacts and relationships, leverage the services, for example, of the Trade Commissioner Service, who can help in these situations. And definitely EDC does have tools to help you mitigate risk with respect to, you know, whether it's suppliers or customers, when there's interruptions in flow of funds or of contracts. So it's worth sort of understanding those things and taking advantage of those tools.
Yeah, and if I may add, in terms of Korea, of course, companies these days are facing the impact of COVID-19, but it was never on a lockdown exactly like it was in Canada or other countries. So things have been going relatively well, but when there's issues between companies in Canada and Korea, as I mentioned in my presentation, we cannot be involved in legal procedure, but we would still be able to call this partner and try to figure out what's the issue and try to support the Canadian business as much as possible in understanding what's the problem and what are the risks. And then they can make their decision and then use some of the other programs that we just mentioned. But, and just to add on, in terms of establishing partnerships, I mean, I think we all have to redefine the way we do business these days. So we have been doing a lot of trade mission, virtual trade mission around trade shows that are virtual. Some trade shows were in person in Korea. We're using all the new tools to try to connect people. And in terms of building relationship, I think the same thing applies if you're virtual, if you're in real person. It needs a lot of preparation. You need to know your market, your competitors. You need to be prepared to provide a lot of information even at the first meetings. So I think those same basic principles will apply either virtually or in person. So preparation for a market takes time and energy, and that's the key to have a successful experience.
Absolutely, and I encourage all of the delegates and any potential exporters to contact the support agencies to help mitigate that risk. But also next week we have, for our pre-mission training session, we have legal considerations and other regulatory frameworks that we'll be touching on as well. A main message is you have to get a contract lawyer to help with those issues. But we have another question from one of our delegates. Ling, would you like to turn on your mic?
Sure.
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Okay, sure. So we got approved for a program called CAN Export for 2020. So the idea is, you know, we got some funding if we go do trade show, and then so there was a bunch of beauty conferences I was gonna go this year, but of course due to travel, due to COVID, we cannot go. So I'm just wondering, how would that be impacted? Like the funding that has been earmarked for us, like 2020, can we still do it if we resume travel in 2021, or that is kind of gone, and then we kind of have to redo it again 2021? So the program was CAN Export, I think was from EDC.
Yeah, I think CAN Export, it's from Global Affairs Canada. It's our program, the Trade Commissioner Service.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my understanding, I mean, I'm not, I don't know all the specifics because I don't run that program. It's my colleague back in Ottawa that received the application and ran the funding. My understanding is that it has been repackaged to take into consideration the fact that companies cannot really travel these days. So some of the funding can be reassigned to other projects, some of the funding can be extended, but I think the best way to get those answers, I would assume you have some point of contact there that was dealing with your file. So you can also send me an email and I can follow up with colleagues in Ottawa, and then I can provide some answers, because I don't have all the details of the update of the programs that they made recently to face to reflect the reality that the business shouldn't be traveling these days. So yeah.
Yeah, okay, that'd be great. Thank you so much.
Great, and one last question from one of our delegates. Ling asks, oh, I've missed it. This is for Michelle, for the Women in Tech. How much should an early stage company be making in terms of MRR or ARR to apply for the program?
Okay, so first let's, this is less about a program, more about positioning you for a number of equity financing rounds. So think I'm just going to ask you to think a little bit differently, because you're going to be thinking about incorporating and partnering with funds like the Women in Tech Fund, but potentially a number of other funds to help you grow. And they're going to provide you with equity capital, and that is going to assume a piece of your business. So they're going to take equity and you're going to give them shares, and they're going to kind of march down the road together. So just to get you thinking about this in the way in which an equity investor would think. So in the case of the Women in Tech Fund, we provide equity into a company. We typically look for companies at the seed stage, which is what you're asking, at the seed stage to have somewhere between 250 and 500,000 in AR. So at the seed stage, at those very early stages, we don't expect that you're necessarily going to have MRR yet. We expect that you're going to be, through first customer validation, your technology is going to be being utilized by a number of first customers, and you're going to be trying to grow that MRR. Typically, at the seed stage, if you haven't had equity before, to accelerate your growth, you're probably looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of anywhere between, it's 250, 500. Some of them are a little bit later, but it's in and around that area, and it'll be AR first. And as you get that seed capital in and you get those investors around the table to help you and work with you to grow the number of companies and logos on your book, then we'll start to see that MRR start to ramp, and it'll ramp slowly as you go through a Series A, and then you'll start to see it really accelerate. So most companies don't see, if you're talking about enterprise SaaS and an MRR model, you mostly won't see a significant acceleration until you get to 2 and usually through a Series A. Depending on the market and all those things, there's lots of variables that I'm not even getting into the weeds on with you because I don't know anything about your company, but hopefully that gives you a little bit to go on as a starting point. And you can reach out to me afterwards if you want more details. I can walk you through it.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And I believe we have run out of time, and thank you to all the guests and delegates and presenters today for joining in support of women entrepreneurs to grow and scale their businesses. I'd like to give one last special thanks to the Federal Economic Development Agency for their continued support in making these training sessions and the trade missions to Asia possible. For the guests and delegates, please remember to join us next Tuesday for a detailed look at the legal framework and regulatory issues to consider when entering the South Korean market, including a deeper dive on the CKFTA, which Annabelle had touched on. And our last session after that is for delegates only, a technical training on market intelligence tools that we've developed at APFC, and further preparation for the virtual mission on November 3rd and 4th. You'll be notified in the same way as you were for today's session. And for all our guests, the virtual mission events on November 3rd will be open to the public. So please stay tuned for more information. And now I turn to our President and CEO of the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada, Stuart Beck, for some closing remarks.
Well, thank you very much, AW. It's always fascinating to hear what people have to say, and the toolkit that the Canadian government has at the disposal of Canadian exporters and Canadian companies. Again, I'd like to thank all the panelists. You did a great job in terms of outlining all the different aspects that are there and available. And I think fundamentally, what we're trying to, from the foundation perspective, is to really encourage people to take a look at Asia, which is where the action will be going forward over the next 20 years. There is going to be a huge opportunity for Canadian companies, and we have to think, and this is what I really find exciting about the companies that we have on this mission, is that they're thinking global, which you need to do because the Canadian market is a small market. And what we have now is we have the technology innovations and the toolkits which will allow companies to start thinking global right from the time that they start building their business. And I think that's so important. And you look at a market like Korea in particular, where historically we've had a very good relationship. We already have a free trade agreement with Korea. There's lots of things that we can, lots of areas that we can exploit in the context of our relationship with Korea. And we have a history and an understanding between the two countries. So having you interested in this market, being able to capitalize it, I think is really important. And as a former trade commissioner myself, I like to hear all these things that are available. Working with EDC, very closely and over the course of my career. It's a wonderful organization. I know that BDC, I've had the opportunity to work with the bank and understand the great role that they play. FedDev, of course, is really an important part of this equation. And finally, Annabelle and the team in Korea, I know they do an excellent job, and they can really work well with everybody that's here on this mission. So I'd just like to say again, from our perspective, a real thanks to Christine Nakamura and the team in Toronto for putting this together. You guys are doing a great job, and I really hope that this turns out to be a very exciting, prosperous, great opportunity for companies to expand their business and end up getting more money and to build and scale into a global powerhouses. So again, thank you all very much for being part of the session, and I look forward to seeing the next ones going forward, and of course the big mission itself in November. So thank you.